Okay, moving forward, is there an efficient way to create a printed book that's also online or website friendly? I know there are ebooks and PDF routes, but anything else? Can I embed or link to a Blurb book I've created? That's another good question, Brock. Digital books, digital illustrated books are sort of like a unicorn. When illustrated digital books first arrived, however many years ago, the thought was that all books would become illustrated digital books. And the problem was that no one bought them and no one wanted them and the sales were not good. And still to this day, no one really knows what to do with an illustrated digital book. In fact, when you look at illustrated digital books, oftentimes they're still designed as fake physical books, which I'm fine with. We all know right to left, turning pages. But some of the most creative photographers I've known that I've sat down with and we've looked at digital book applications, these are people that say, I don't want to go right to left. I want to go into the book and I want to dig down layers digitally and multimedia wise into these books and then be able to come out. I want choose your own ending, all these things. And the technology's not quite there yet. So with Blurb, if you use Blurb Bookright, you can do a digital book behind the scenes that's built automatically as you're building the physical copy. So that arrives as both a high-res PDF for I think $4. And then you can also buy a digital version of that book that's applicable for any of the iPad, iPhone kind of things. But a lot of people in the world use Android, so you're going to be limited on that side. I would try at least design a book in Bookright on Blurb and then get one and load it up on your iPad and see if you like it. I actually never thought I would use these, but I have used them quite a bit. But here is how I use digital books. I love movie trailers. I've always loved movie trailers. I think movie trailers are a high art in the cinema world because they show the skill of what a good editor can do. You can take a movie trailer and you can make a film or you can break a film, and you can also take it in a million different directions. And I think digital books work really well as book trailers. I would never use a digital book as a replica of the physical book, because no one on the screen has the attention span to go all the way through the book. So I use very condensed, short, multimedia versions of that book. I'll add a little audio file. I'll add a few images. I'll add a little copy. I often do behind the scenes of what it took to do the project, and I just use them as trailers. And the only time I would ever show them is on an airplane. When I'm sitting with someone and they go, who are you? What do you do? And you say, I work for Blurb. And they're like, what's that? And the whole conversation begins and you're like, oh no, I just wanted to sit here quietly for the next 3 hours and this person won't stop talking. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I'll be like, oh, you can see sort of a trailer for the book right here, and I'll show them on the iPad. And then they're like, oh my God, you're amazing. You should win the Nobel Prize. And I'm like, no, really. And they're like, free drinks for this guy. Happens all the time. Okay, moving on. Thanks, Dan. I have 2 questions. All right, who did this? David, 2 questions. Greedy. Just kidding. I have 2 books printed by Blurb. Oh, this is really good. And I have, the color is slightly inconsistent despite the file being calibrated on my monitor on both occasions. Wow. Number 1, huge percentage of people do not calibrate, including pros, believe it or not. I've heard every excuse in the book for not calibrating is I'll say, what'd you calibrate with? And people get really squirrely. It's not complicated. It's not hard. It's not expensive. Calibrate your monitor. Otherwise, you just do not know what you're looking at. The human eye is amazingly adaptive and can look at a screen that's 30 points cyan. And if you look at it long enough, it'll turn it into middle gray for you. Your eyes will. So calibrating is good. You're on the right thing. You use the same camera, the same lens, Sony a7R3, but not the same lens, and the paper stock also being the same. So the one change here was that your lens was different. That should not have that much of a difference. My question is, can I produce a test-proof print before finalizing my order? I mentioned this a little bit earlier. There's no way to print a section of a book. You've got to print a sample. But why not print if you're going to do a 12 by 12 book, why not do a 7/7 soft cover on the same paper and use that as your testing process and save yourself a boatload of money? Minimum file size. The second question, let me just address something earlier that you didn't ask about. Inconsistency. There will always be, well, hopefully not always, because maybe, we put a monkey in space a few years ago, so we should be able to figure this out. There's consistencies and inconsistencies in digital printing. There always has been, but they're getting better and better and better and better. Even from the time that Blurb started to now, the quality of digital printing, not just with Blurb, but with everyone, has gotten exponentially better. But you have to expect a little variance. The key is that things are in parameter and that you should have consistent results over time. I always expect that there's going to be a little change, but if there's too much change, that's when I would say, okay, there's something went wrong. I need to send this back and get a reprint kind of thing. Second question, as a guideline, what's the minimum file size? This is how I do this, and there's a million ways from A to B. And Blurb has a lot of really good technical information on the site, so you can find all kinds of minutia about this. This is how I break down the technical side of printing. And again, I'm ballparking this for everyone. Calibrate your monitor. The second part of that equation is consider your monitor density. If you're sitting in a room with your monitor brightness turned all the way up and it's driving all that light through that color, there is no way you're going to reproduce that, not just with Blur, but with anyone. So if your monitor's jacked all the way up, that's not set correctly for pre-press conditions, and you're probably going to get images that are going to print dark, so you've got to keep density in mind. And the other thing is, whatever size book I'm making, if I'm doing a 10 by 10 and I'm shooting Hasselblad, I'll prep my files at 300 DPI at least 10 by 10. I typically err a little bit because I would rather use a larger image than have the software interpolate for me. 240 is fine as well in terms of DPI. I don't think you're going to be able to differentiate or distinguish between the two. And again, there's a lot of tech info on the Blurb site if you need any more than that. Okay, this is from Keith. I received my AG23. I think you're onto something. Thank you. That was one heck of a lot of work over a year. So a year plus of work. And just to throw a nod here. So I work full-time for Blurb, as you all know. And I've done a lot of projects over the years, collaborations with other companies and things like that. I've never had a collaboration partner like these guys. And that is driven by one person in particular who is their director, a guy named Rick Elder. The reason AG exists is the Beyond crew. That is a simple fact. Yes, I was involved in recruiting contributors, explaining. I've been helping sort of behind the scenes. But the financials behind how this came to be, we have to thank Beyond for that. And so we're working on issue 2 right now. Again, COVID has slowed everything down. It's made it very challenging. And also I work full time and Rick works, his job's even crazier than mine. So how he is able to pull any of this off, I don't know. I think potentially, and I'm almost, I would say 25% sure that he is potentially a cyborg. That is, there's rumors out there and I've never seen him eat. And so that's another sign. Okay, thank you. You're onto something. I enjoyed the 34-minute video on film. God, was that 34 minutes? That's outrageous. I need an editor. My question is, with all the technical aspects you present in Film Labs you mentioned, it all seems that they only develop and scan. So the question is, are black and white prints made from digital scans the same as prints made directly from negatives old school? Is the film look still retained in these prints? Is it silly to shoot film only to have it scanned? No, not at all. And Keith, most of the labs that I'm talking about, they also make prints. You also, to throw another wrinkle in here, you have labs like Digital Silber out of the East Coast, which takes light jet printer and uses a red laser to print on traditional photographic paper. So you have a digital silver image and they are gorgeous. If I was doing an exhibition right now and shooting film, that's how I would print them. Also, inkjet printers definitely retain the look of the film. In fact, for a decade, I shot T-Max 3200. That was the only film I shot for all of my projects. And that film in the darkroom is a nightmare. Nightmare. But printed digitally, it is a dream. It looks so good. I would definitely recommend it. So it doesn't matter if you're scanning film and printing digitally, it still looks badass and is totally worth doing. This is another long one, Keith. I might break that 34-minute rule. I'm just gonna keep going. I'm just gonna live stream this for the rest of my adult life. Oh, this is another one from Ibrahim, although it's a little gray here, Ibrahim. Where to start from, ? And how often should I make prints? There's no hard set rule. That is 100% personal preference. I think the better you get at making prints, the more fun you're going to have with it. And you'll probably print more often, but you will be more selective about what you print because the cost will increase. This is one of the beauties of printing your photography that people often look at as a limitation, which is, oh my God, I have to pay for this. Trust me, when you are trying to show us your work, the rest of the human population loves the fact that you have to pay to print because it means you will edit your work at a higher level and then not subject the rest of us to galleries with 500 images. And Ibrahim, I'm not talking about you in particular. I'm talking about everybody. Printing, the cost of printing, just like film, the cost of using a roll of film, buying it, shooting it, shipping it, processing it, scanning it, printing it, it's expensive. So it makes you use your head. It makes you think. Printing is an elaboration of that, where you basically say, you look at an image, and I've done this many times. I've been in the dark room, I've put a negative in the enlarger, I've mixed the chemistry, I got my paper in the paper safe, I got the red light on, I am ready to go, and I turn on the enlarger, and I stare down at that image and realize it's not good enough to print. And you sit there cursing yourself and then you take the negative out of the enlarger and you pour the chemistry away and you put everything away and you go back in the field. That's the hard reality of being a photographer. You've spoken about a consistent look in a project, one lens, one format, but what if you happen to have a perfect image in a different format, i.e. 6x6 color when everything else is 35 black and white? I have done that exact scenario. Would you manipulate it to conform or disregard the image for the edit? Ooh, Tim, that's a really good question. Knowing myself, and I have done exactly what you just said, because I would shoot 35 in the Leica, 2 Leicas, 2 lenses, 35 black and white, and then a Hasselblad with an 80 in color neg, Portra. And I did that all over the world. And there were times where I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I not committing to one format? But the Hasselblad was like a drug. The Hasselblad was easy. It made you feel like you were making progress. The 35 black and white is hard. It's not exotic. It doesn't look particularly any way in general. And you're just like, oh, it's not going to be good enough. I'm going to substitute with the Hasselblad. I can see it both ways. I can see just saying, look, even though that's a great image, I'm going to leave it out. I'll do a separate project with the color. But at the other time, you can justify anything as long as it works. And so I would do some testing. I would see where that image lands in the story, why. You could even have a disclaimer, an explanation, whatever. I wouldn't throw it away if it was that good. I would probably try to find a way to work it in. I've seen this go bad on a lot of people, and I've seen it work for a very small number of others. All right, we're going to keep going, and then I'm going to cut this off. Hello, Mr. Milnor. Really enjoyed your book reviews. Regarding printing, I do as much as I can from Instax to A3 prints. I wanted to ask you about the difference between color and black and white. Is it true that color is better on glossy and black and white on matte? No, that's not really true. It could be for your individual project, style, or look. You may say, yes, my black and white looks better on coated stock and my color looks better on uncoated, which is what I did with Blurb. But you can't make that blanket statement across the board. It just doesn't make sense, because the next photographer is going to say, well, I don't like coated paper. I only like uncoated, and I'm going to print everything. So it's impossible to make a blanket statement. I have various colors in photos in color and black and white for my travels and closer to home. How to choose them, how many photos from a given topic to print so that they're interesting and make sense, and what photos are worth printing, landscapes, portraits, or real life. And that's MACIEJ. What I love about YouTube is that it's such a global enterprise. It's nice to see names. I'm guessing maybe that's from the name from the Balkans, potentially. Am I wrong about that? Mashij, M-A-C-I-E-J. Anyway, lots of questions in there. How to choose them. I would choose based on your aesthetic, your composition, the images that you think and feel are the best of the group, and I would get rid of everything else. And when I say get rid of, I don't mean throw away, I mean just move away so that they're in the outtakes pile and not in the selects pile. The number of photos is going to simply depend on how many good images you have. You don't ever want to substitute subpar images to get yourself to a certain image count. I would much rather have 8 really good images to work with than 8 good and 8 not so good, because I was trying to get to 16. I would just take the 8 best ones, because you do not want any fat in the story. If you have fat, your reader will depart the story. They just will not have the attention to get through it. You always want to use only your best images. And in terms of what images are worth printing, landscape, portraits, and real life, everything is worth printing if it's a good image that lends itself to the story. And remember, a portfolio is completely different from a book. A portfolio is a sample of your best images that could be across all genres, doesn't necessarily tell a story. A book has a narrative. A book has a story arc and a narrative, and that's the key. And it's not often made up of portfolio pictures. It's often made up of pictures that will help tell a story. All right, a couple more. Hey, Daniel, I would love to hear your thoughts on how to progress layouts when working on a long-term project. What's your workflow when laying out your photos and text when working towards your final product? So that's a great question, Azriel. It's a tricky one too. The longer you're into the bookmaking process, the better you get at it, the more it can creep into your brain while you're in the field. I have done projects where by the time I left the field, the layout was already in my head for the entire book, spread by spread. That is not necessarily a good thing. Maybe I'm a savant. Doubtful, but I'll throw it out there. But I would shoot, and I'd done this so many times that in my head I was like, oh, that's a horizontal, I'm gonna have copy block, I got this, these 2 squares, doing this, and then you get done. The problem was when you sit down to edit, there's always going to be changes, revisions, corrections, etc. And sometimes it would like not jive with what was going on in my head. So I think the best thing to do is to focus 100% in the field on making the best possible photographs you can. That is the singular most important thing on the front end of the project. When you're done on the back, I like to make small prints of all the best images, small, and then start laying them out and sequencing them on a table. I will lay them out and I will slowly start to build the sequence in small prints. And again, making the small prints is forcing me to spend money and make decisions about my work. Making small prints forces me to apply critical thought to what is the best work that I have, make the small prints, lay them out, and then I start to translate from those physical prints into the software, whether it's InDesign, plugin, Bookright, PDF uploader, sometimes Lightroom if I want to go that route. So and then I just start to play and work. I get second opinions from people that I respect, people that are far better at this stuff than I am. If I have time and if it's a book that I'm trying to put out into the world to say something with, then I want to make sure that it's good. A lot of times I'm just making books for me. It doesn't really matter. I take chances, I experiment, I print the book, I get it, I go, I like this, and I move on. All right, almost done. Super appreciate that you take the time for questions. Can you elaborate on your journaling process and how it integrates into your printing? Yeah, so I use the journal every day. I write in it every day. I posted photos in it today. Some of the worst photos I've ever made and probably some of the ugliest photos I've ever made. This was sort of the spread from today. And these are like Fuji Instax, and for some reason they have this bizarre colored frames. Terrible. But I love it anyway. And I just write whatever comes into my head. I very rarely do like a step-by-step of what happened during the day. I'm typically writing about what's happening, those thoughts rattling around in my brain. I often will sketch layouts as well. I'll have an idea for maybe how I want to lay things out on a page, and I'll sketch it in there. I take a lot of notes in the field. I studied journalism, so when I'm in the field shooting, I'm constantly making observations and writing them down, because if you think you are going to remember these details later, you're kidding yourself. You won't. And so small observations of what I'm seeing that I then work into the copy that accompanies the photographs when I'm trying to do a book or narrative or magazine along those lines. All right. I think we're going to cut it off there. There are quite a few more pages left here, and I think this has gone on long enough. I will come back with a second episode of print questions. These are all really good. They're questions that I see on a regular basis, and I think what they represent are roadblocks. And that's my goal with the series, is to get you past roadblocks, whether you are printing with Blurb or MagCloud or whoever else you want to print with. I think these questions apply, and if I can help you get through a roadblock, things are good. So I will be back.